All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of All About the Gear. My name is Frederick Van Johnson. I'm sitting here with my good friend and cohort, Mr. Doug K. Today we're going to be talking about the world's smallest. I think the Panasonic GM1 was billed as the world's smallest interchangeable lens micro four thirds camera. They updated the line with the GM5, and that's the topic of today's episode of All About the Gear. Doug K., how you doing, man? What's going on?
I'm doing great, Frederick. Getting ready here for a trip to Cuba, another workshop there, taking a group, and just been busy getting a new camera every 2 weeks.
You love it. See, be careful what you ask for. You asked for that. See, and now you're getting the waves of camera gear, right?
It's true. It's true. And as I've complained before, I look forward to going to Cuba and at least shooting a little bit with my own gear.
I know, it's amazing. Yeah, but it's a good problem to have.
It is.
So this the GM5, like I said, you know, in that little intro, the GM5 is a successor to the GM1, and that was this guy, right? So this was Panasonic's, and this came out last year, right? So
that's right, yeah, September of 2013, so a year and a half ago.
Yeah, 2013, and this is, like I said, the world's smallest micro four thirds interchangeable lens camera that you can swap lenses on and off of. These things, I like this one. I like this little camera because you can throw it in your little bag. Plus, I think these, I want to hear what you have to say about it, obviously, but these, in a lot of ways, with just a little body cap on there, are like the ultimate backup camera. Because they take no space in your bag. You just put it in there, make sure you have a battery, and slide it into a hidden pocket, and you always have a camera in case your main camera fails. But it is a very powerful micro four thirds camera just on its own. So what do these things run, Doug? What do you think?
Yeah, well, here's the one I got from Panasonic to review, and mine is red. I want you to note that because you can get this in black or with the red faux alligator leatherette look on it.
Leatherette. This is the black one that I'm holding up.
Yeah, and they're actually the same size. So this camera is, you know, it's odd. The price is $900 with the kit lens. When I look for the price of the body alone, I get the same price. So we're recording this in sort of mid-January. The standard 16 megapixel sensor, pretty much the same sensor as on the GM1 as far as I can tell. The GM1, by the way, is now down to about $475 for just the body, and cool. $650 with the kit lens. So the GM1's gotten cheaper. And what they've done is they've added the electronic viewfinder here on the rear. You can see that electronic viewfinder.
Yep.
They've added the hot shoe because they took out the pop-up flash on the GM1, yep. And they've updated the firmware in the camera a little bit.
Yeah, and it's in a lot of ways, because when you put it next to, say, this guy here is the LX100, right? And putting these two next to each other like that, I don't know if you can show that full screen. These two next to each other, they look like siblings, right? I mean, they obviously they are siblings, but this actually looks like LX100 that's been left in the dryer a little bit too long, and the LX100 looks like a GX7 that's been left in the dryer a little bit too long. So it's like the Goldilocks of cameras, you know. It's really, really interesting, especially when they're all in black. So these cameras, 16 megapixel micro four thirds sensor in this thing. The body and controls of this guy, right? So everything is obviously tight and very well thought out and put together. When you were out on the road playing with this, what did it feel like? I mean, did it feel like you could use it as a usable camera, or did it feel like, you know, like the undersized spare tire that you want to get rid of as soon as you find a real spare tire?
Well, I'll say overall I had a really good time with this camera, as I've had with pretty much all the Lumix cameras that have come out recently. I did not review the GM1 when it first came out. I'm not sure why we didn't get to that one, but I had a lot of fun with this camera. It's great being as stealthy as you can be with this small camera. When you have a red camera, nobody takes you seriously, so you can do some great street photography. You know, nobody's afraid of, you know, you're going to publish this somewhere. Right. So I really enjoyed it. Again, like you said, just because of the size. Now the buttons are small. You could never use these things with puffy gloves or anything like that. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun to shoot with. So the basic kit lens is what is it? It's a what's the
12 to 32.
12 to 32. So it's the equivalent of a 24 to 65 or so on this thing. Now, it does come with, because they got rid of the built-in flash, they ship it with this little strobe that you can put into the hot shoe. It comes with the camera, but of course it's something extra that you have to remember to take with you, which I never did when I was shooting. I tried a few fill flash shots with it here at home, and it does what you'd expect, which is, weak fill flash and so forth.
You know what I think? I think that little flash is, and even the little pop-up flash on the GM1. I think for me at least, I don't think I would ever use it to actually do fill flash or anything like that. But I think with the Panasonic strobes that you can purchase separately, that strobe, that pop-on strobe, can act as a controller for any number, or I forget what the number is, but it's a lot of external strobes. So kind of like the Nikon CLS system and the Canon strobe system, where you can control multiple strobes simultaneously from one master. That little guy can act as the master for the rest of the strobe. So I think that's for me at least, that would be the main use for it.
Yeah, I've not tried any Panasonic strobe system, so I can't really think about that. But that is a good reason to use this. Although, again, a camera like this is for going out and shooting. I can't imagine a portrait shoot and putting this on a tripod.
I know.
It's not the camera I'd probably use for that.
I know. But what about the battery life in this guy? So looking at, it's a tiny battery, right? So there it is, right there. It's the little tiny.
This is one thing that surprised me with this camera. I'm used to short battery life. On the Sonys, they're criticized because it's down in the 400 shot range, but this guy is rated at only 220 shots. So for me, I didn't have a spare battery with the review camera, and I had a dead camera in about 2 hours. So that doesn't bother me. The batteries are so small, but you have to remember to buy extra batteries. This isn't a 2-battery camera. This is a 3-battery camera. If you're going to go out for a day of shooting, I would say. But that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, 220 shots. It's about what, six-ish rolls of film, right? So it's if you're using the film metric, then it's like, wow, I got 6 rolls of film to shoot with. But if you're using modern 2015 math, then yeah, that's really short battery life. You better, if this is your only camera for the whole day, you better have a pocket of batteries. But luckily, they're tiny, right?
Yes, yeah, they are very small.
Yeah. Now, what about autofocus? One of the problems that I had with the GM1 was autofocus, right? So, or not autofocus, it was manual focus. But this one, is there like a physical dial on here for autofocus? What's the difference?
What they've got, and you should take a look at your GM1 and tell us what that's got too. On the top of the camera, it's interesting when you have very few controls. Interesting what the manufacturers choose to put on. They didn't put exposure compensation on the top. What they did is they put this dial here, which is switching between manual, continuous, and single-shot autofocus.
Yeah.
What's the GM1 got on the top?
The GM1 has the same dial. I'll show you. So it's got a little bit more. So on the top, it's got the autofocus, single, autofocus, continual, and manual focus. And in the middle, if you can see there, in the middle of that button is a function button, which I think it defaults to Wi-Fi, and then there's the power on-off switch right there, and inside the power on-off switch is the shutter release button, and then the obligatory PASM dial right there. Right.
Well, for me, I actually enjoyed the fact that I could switch easily between single autofocus and continuous, because I did shoot with this in continuous mode quite a bit when I was doing some street photography. So I thought that was a good use of the real estate, but that's going to be personal preference. Some people would rather have a exposure compensation dial in that little bit of real estate or something else.
That's me. I mean, those dials up there seem to be well, then again, there's the thumb dial on the back of the camera that is exposure compensation. But the dials on the top, or, it doesn't for me, it doesn't necessarily have to be exposure compensation, but the focus setting, the autofocus continuous versus single, that's not something that I need immediate access to all the time. It's not like I'm running and gunning like, oh, I need to switch to continuous focus. That's something that I'll set at the beginning of whatever I'm doing and leave it. I don't need it like right there. I would much have rather have had that be exposure compensation, because that's something I'm going to be messing with all the time, and I need quick access to it.
That's interesting. I mean, I'd rather have both, but it's a difference in shooting style, I think, because I do switch focus modes relatively frequently when I'm out on the street. One thing to consider here now, the lenses that the kit lens is one of these that you have to remember to sort of open it up. It's a zoom lens that compresses within itself when it's not in use, so that turns it on just putting it out there. But what was interesting is I do also some manual focus work. This lens, the kit lens, does not have a focus ring. It only has a zoom ring.
Yeah.
And if you want to manually focus this lens, you actually have to go into the menu system.
Yeah.
And use a slider with the touch screen. So that was
one of my least favorite lenses, just for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Once I was shooting, it was fine, but that was a little bit of a frustration with this thing. I'm not a real fan of these lenses that collapse and that you have to remember to turn them on, but that's just because I'm not used to them, and every time I turn the camera on, it reminds me that I have to extend the lens before I can take a picture.
Yeah. That was an issue with the original version of that lens on the GM1, but I kind of need that focus ring on there. I'm kind of spoiled now, especially with some of the other lenses I have that have a focus ring, obviously, and a physical aperture ring as well. I kind of want that. It's kind of like, give me that. I don't want to dive into menus to set focus. It seems completely counterintuitive.
That's so what I want to do is I want to cover some more of the basics, and then I want to come back and talk a little more about lenses.
Okay.
Again, just to make sure we cover the basic stuff here. So it's got an electronic shutter. You can use the mechanical shutter for rear curtain focus. That means it uses a mechanical shutter at the end of the exposure. That's only for a 1/500th of a second or slower exposures. So most people are going to probably leave this in either auto mode, where the camera selects the shutter, or they're going to leave it in silent mode, in which case it's always using electronic shutter. And that'll go to a 16,000th of a second, which is nice and fast if you need it.
Yeah.
The image quality of the camera is the same as the GM1. And pretty much the same as the GX7. Same sensor as the GM1 in there, which is not bad for this price and type of camera.
Yeah.
A little better in low light than I expected. In fact, I had to email Panasonic saying, "Did you guys do something? Because I'm taking some indoor low light shots and they look a little better." And they said, "Well, it's the same sensor. We did make some firmware improvements, so maybe that has to." Is the reason that I think the image quality is a little better than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Again, the LCD, it doesn't tilt, but it does have touch for both the menus and touch autofocus as well, or at least being able to position that. The electronic viewfinder is interesting. This is the main difference, I think, between the GM1 and the GM5. The electronic viewfinder, when you look through it, at first it's sort of a shock because the image is very narrow, very small looking image, and you say, wow, I'm used to such a better look through the viewfinder. Yeah. But you get used to it. The quality of it's pretty good, but it does initially seem real small.
Now, are you an EVF user?
I am, and that's because of the glasses I wear. It's hard for me to use an LCD in most cases. If I use an LCD, I really want a tilt one, so that I can shoot from down low and up high, and this doesn't tilt, which is disappointing. At first I thought this screen was really small.
Yep.
It turns out it's not. It's just the camera's small. And when I compared this to some of my Sonys, for example, this screen is probably about as big as almost any other out there.
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird. I find myself shooting more with the LCD than the EVF, and the EVF almost becomes kind of a stealthy backup feature, where if I'm shooting pictures in a dark environment and there are people behind me that will get annoyed by my LCD, I can turn it off and use the EVF. But I don't find myself using the EVF as a matter of photography. I don't know. I just like the big screen. I like to be able to touch things on it and compose on all that real estate rather than kind of looking like this and then moving your thumb cursor around to put your focus point on whatever. It seems like a better use of real estate using the bigger screen.
Yeah. No, I think so. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I want to point out something now.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be fun.
Uh-oh.
Panasonic, when I decided to do the review, they said, "Hey, would you be willing to look at one of our new lenses?" And I said, "Sure, absolutely." Normally we just test with the kit lens, but send me the lens. So here are two of my lenses. The top is a 70-200 f2.8 Nikon. Gorgeous lens, heavy, expensive, and large, takes terrific images. Any Nikon shooter who's ever had this 70-200 loves it. I don't know anybody who doesn't.
Yep.
Here is the 70-200 f4 for Sony full-frame cameras.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's as gorgeous as this Nikon lens, but it does a very good job. And now I want to show you this little guy.
What is that?
That is a, I'm sorry about all the shadows we have here. That is a 70-200 for Micro Four Thirds that Panasonic is making. So in terms of equivalent field of view, this little guy, which I can just put here in the palm of my hand, right? Of course, I'm holding it much closer to the camera now. But this little guy is, in many ways, the equivalent of these big, big guys here. And it, you know, image quality, no, it's not quite the same. I mean, this lens is only, what is this lens? This is about $400 versus, you know, well over $2,000 for this Nikon, close to $3,000 maybe. But when you're out on the street, you don't want to take these big puppies with you, right?
Yeah.
You want to come there, you want to take, this camera's so small I can't find it on my desk. So you want to take this guy, pop off that lens, take the rear lens cap off, if you can remember how. See how well this goes? Always practice before you do a review show.
There's a dot, yep.
Again, it opens up, right? But that is the equivalent, the equivalent in terms of field of view of a 70-200. Now, it's 1 stop slower than the Sony. It's 2 stops slower than the Nikon. It's optically not even close, but boy, was this a lot of fun to shoot with.
Really? Wow. Does it have image stabilization in there?
It's image stabilized, and it has a focus ring.
Oh,
so
and it's only $400? Really?
Yeah, $400 for this thing.
Huh.
And I know I have not had a chance to use it on a larger Micro Four Thirds like a, you know, GX7 or let's say a GH4 or an Olympus body EM1, but it'd sure be fun to try because this lens. Now, I had an interesting thing when I was writing my notes for this review. I said, wow, you know, I got the equivalent of a 70-200 in this little package. It doesn't cost much. I can put the lens in a pocket. And then I said, you know, it's funny how we use different criteria to judge different cameras and lenses, because you can get the FZ1000, which is a super zoom Lumix camera, which has a longer focal length and a much wider zoom range. And it's not all that much money. So it's just funny, different cameras, you know, and you don't have to change lenses.
Right.
But still for anybody who's used to having, you know, zooms that are wide angle, mid-range, and telephoto, those 3 types of zooms, being able to get this telephoto zoom in a small package is a lot of fun.
And that new series of lenses are, if I read correctly, those are designed specifically for these smaller bodies, so they don't, you know, extend beyond the bottom of the camera, and they fit very nicely on these the new GM style bodies, correct?
So yeah, I heard that it's designed specifically for these smaller cameras, but I wondered, does that mean that it doesn't work as well for the larger cameras like the GX7 and the GH4?
No, not at all. No, these cameras, I mean, they're all using the standard Micro Four Thirds mount. So which is one of the cool things about Micro Four Thirds. All the lenses work everywhere. I think this lens is designed to be small, in keeping with the whole, you know, miniature ethos that these GM series bring. You know, it's kind of putting a larger lens on this camera defeats the purpose of having this little tiny pocketable Micro Four Thirds camera. So I think Panasonic went ahead and built these smaller form factor lenses to keep with the Lilliputian size of these particular bodies, so that it doesn't look weird while you're walking around with this giant lens on, or relatively giant lens on this little tiny body.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to hearing you getting a hold of this lens and trying it on your larger Lumix cameras, because I'm curious to see, you know, the image quality isn't great. Do you have a GH4?
I do.
Okay. Somehow we have to get this lens over to you, and we'll have to give it a try.
Yeah, I would love to try that out. Yeah, because they love you more than they love me. They send you the cool stuff to play with.
Well, they know who's really doing the reviews. That's
exactly.
Okay, so again, manual focus is really nice with this lens because it has the focus ring, which helps a lot.
Yep.
And the camera has sort of automatic zoom in picture for manual focusing. So as soon as you touch the manual focus ring, if you're in manual mode, it immediately shows you a picture in picture. It has focus peaking. It's a pretty good camera for manual focus.
And that's the thing that I was surprised at, focus peaking built into this little tiny body. You know, that is killer, because the GH3, which is Panasonic's previous flagship sort of DSLR-esque body, doesn't have focus peaking. These little guys have focus peaking built into them. So,
Yeah,
you know,
nice.
kudos to
Very nice.
Panasonic for that.
In terms of video, they upped things a little bit. The GM1 was 1080p, 30 frames a second. Now they're doing 1080p at 60. They're certainly not doing 4K in a body like this. There just would be too much processing power and heat to do that.
Mhm.
But again, not a great video camera. No external mic jack or headphone jack.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know about the size thing, because you know I look at these two cameras, and like this is the LX100, which shoots 4K, right? And the GM5, size wise, they're not that much different, you know. So, I don't want to be Panasonic's R&D team, but I don't. There's one thing. On one hand, I don't know that I'd even care to have 4K in this camera. So maybe that was a reason, but I don't think it's an engineering obstacle as to why they kept it out, because there's some really small devices out there shooting 4K these days.
Yeah, not this small. I don't think you're going to see anything. Well, not this small in a still camera. Let's put it that way.
Right. I mean, but you look at like Sony with the latest version of their action cams, those shoot 4K, and
Right.
those are
But that's a video.
smaller than.
Yeah, that's really a dedicated video camera.
It is. It is. It is. Okay.
So let's see, what else we got here?
So yeah, video. You're going to talk about connectivity options, like with Wi-Fi and all that stuff.
Yeah, they left out the NFC. Somebody suggested it might again be a space problem. I don't know that the NFC chip takes up all that much, but anyway, it's Wi-Fi. Yes, NFC no, GPS no.
Yeah.
Lumix. I played with the mobile app that Lumix has. I think Lumix probably has one of the best mobile apps, at least for iPhone.
Yeah.
I've never played with the Android version, but I think they really figured that one out better than most people have. So I like that. If you want to do remote control of your camera, if you want to transfer images, the Lumix app is really good.
I love it. Yeah, I use it all the time. That's one of the cool things I like about the Panasonic system for me, is that, you know, I've got a couple of Panasonic cameras, and they all work similarly, you know, with a few differences depending on the camera body. But, you know, the app connects to all of them, and I'm sitting at dinner doing the obligatory shot of the calamari, and I can transfer the image over to my phone, make some edits in Snapseed or whatever, and text it to whomever I'm having dinner with right there. You know, it's just, you know, that being able to just do that really quickly with very little, you know, stress in the way to get it done is, I think, a huge selling point. And to your point about Android, the Android version of the image app is, I think, I would say, on par or the same as the one on iOS. So there's not a whole lot of difference there.
Okay, good. Good.
So what else? So I think we're down to the big question here, Doug, and that's, who is in the ring with this guy? You know, who's the competition?
It's interesting. You know, there are a couple of ways to look at this. Let's first look at other interchangeable lens cameras.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you certainly have to look still at the GM1, which is, again, image-wise, going to give you the same quality of image or very close to it, which is now down to 450 or a little more for the body only. So that's maybe half the price of this camera, or a little bit more than half the price. If you don't need the EVF, I would say this might be the one that you should go for. Save the money. There they are.
Yeah, and Panasonic hasn't discontinued the GM1. If memory serves, the GM1 product still continues. The GM5 is just another addition to the product line, not a replacement or evolution of the GM1.
I think it is, though, because I was on their website yesterday, and they said the GM5 is their smallest micro four thirds camera. Well, it's a little larger than the GM1, so maybe that's true. It's still, you can still buy them. There's still an inventory at places like Amazon and B&H. So who knows what, you know, by the time this is out, by the time we publish this show, what the status will be. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one to consider. I think you should also look at the GX7,
Mm-hmm.
less than $700 with a kit zoom. Again, roughly the same image quality as this in a slightly larger body, and therefore, slightly better controls, I think, on the GX7. Still a very good camera.
Yeah.
But, and I hate to be a Sony fan here. I am a Sony user. I do have some prejudices. But, for half the price of this camera, you can get what was my pick of the year last year, which is the Sony a6000. It's a
Yeah.
much larger sensor. It's APS-C size. It's 24 megapixels. And it's substantially better image quality than this. Now, again, it's interchangeable lens camera. It's not nearly as small as this one. It's a much
Yeah.
larger camera, not much larger, but a larger camera. But still, I think there are some interesting points on the price performance curve here, because you don't always get what you pay for these days. You can often get a better camera for less if you're willing to make certain trades. I think with this camera, you're paying something for the miniaturization. I think that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with you there. That A6000 is amazing, right? So if the way that I look at it, if you're in the Panasonic system and you're looking for a camera, you just want to get this camera because it's cool and it's the world's smallest, blah blah blah, and all that, then that's one reason. If you want, like I was saying at the beginning, the ideal sort of backup small spare tire camera to go in your bag that's not going to make any compromises on image quality, and you'll have the familiar OS should your main camera, should also be Panasonic that you're moving down to. Should that one go away for some reason, you can still continue the shoot. But if you're just jumping in and you're looking at this camera as one of your, it's going to be your camera. This is where you're going to create art with, and this is your thing. Yeah, I definitely give the A6000 a really good hard look before you pull the trigger, because that is an amazing body as well. But again, you're buying into that Sony system versus the Micro Four Thirds Panasonic system.
Right. I think then there's another group of cameras that you might want to consider. If you don't need interchangeable lenses, there are probably 4 cameras you ought to look at. The Fuji X30, which I liked very much when we reviewed it, $600 with a built-in 4x zoom. Nice camera. Again, bigger than this. These are all somewhat larger. The RX100 Mark III, I've got it somewhere here. Let me take a look and show you the difference in size. A very popular non-interchangeable lens camera. And as you can see here, the RX100 is actually smaller. The RX100 I can put in my pocket. The GM5 I really can't put into my pocket. The lens is just too deep. There's too much of a bulge. But
I'm not even going to go there, Doug.
Don't go there. Don't go there. But I like it. And this camera, the RX100, is a little bit cheaper now. It's down to about $800. By the way, that's another thing I should mention. This GM5 they're selling now for $900. The trend is that after 3 or 4 months, all these cameras start to be discounted.
Yeah.
So a camera that's $900 right now, by the time we're into the spring, is probably going to be down to $800 or even $750. So if you don't need to have the very latest and greatest, get the one that's a little older. Sometimes you can save yourself quite a bit of money.
Yeah, you avoid the early adopter tax, right?
Yeah. Now that's exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. Canon G7X, as opposed to the GX7. Canon G7X Mark II is a very popular camera. $800 with a fixed lens. Good lens, nice fast lens. And another that you mentioned, Frederick, that we both like very much. It's another Lumix camera, the LX100.
Yeah, that's this
same
guy
price,
right here.
roughly the same price as this camera.
Yep.
Roughly the same image quality again, but a really, really nice camera.
Yeah, and this one, and we reviewed this one. This one, I'm a big fan of this camera with some caveats. Like the GM5 has an awesome touchscreen. I know we get dinged all the time for talking about touchscreens, and people come out of the woodwork saying that they hate touchscreens, blah blah blah. But I like touchscreens. This has a touchscreen. This guy, which is arguably a better camera in many ways, does not have a touchscreen. So Panasonic, what's up with that? I don't get it.
What's up with that?
What's up with that? Yeah. So they're leaving. I think they're leaving room for the LX200 or the LX110 or something.
Yeah.
So 16 megapixels, Micro Four Thirds on that one. So okay, bottom line, this camera, the target for it, who's it for? I say, I'm anxious to hear what you say, because I say this guy is for, you take it, you put a body cap on it like that, and throw it in your bag when you're traveling, and you have the ideal backup camera for your others, your other system. Who do you say it's for?
Well, that's certainly one of the best use cases. You're correct. If you are already in the Micro Four Thirds world, whether you're using Olympus or Leica/Panasonic, and you want a little camera, get this. It is a great second camera. One of those use cases we've discussed is if you're going on a trip, you want to have a backup body. Give this camera to your traveling partner to use, and then you've always got it as a spare.
Yeah.
It's definitely size is the big part of this too. If you want a small camera, if you want to go with that 35 to 100, that new zoom, that's the 70 to 200 equivalent, you'll really enjoy shooting with this. I found, there's also the question of what camera do you take with you when you're running out the door and you're not planning to shoot, but you want to have a camera.
Yeah.
Sometimes I usually take this, Sony RX100 with me, but I found myself grabbing this one, especially with the longer lens. I just said, I'm going out to run some errands, throw this onto the passenger seat, run out the door, and maybe there's something I want to shoot, maybe there isn't, but I want to, and that one came into play quite a bit.
Something beyond your cell phone. And for me, when I run out the door, it's the LX100. That's the one I grab, and it's and for me, I know, like I was saying before, I know the OS, so it's easy to navigate in there. It's got a fixed lens on there, so I've got the zoom ratio. If I decide for some reason that there's something that I want to shoot video of, I can actually capture 4K with it. So it seems to be the all-around sort of versatile camera. And I'm also planning on using it as a B-roll camera. So when I do GH4 or 4K stuff, the sensors color-wise match up pretty good. So it becomes almost an ideal B-roll or second camera for a video shoot. So
right. You're talking about
the more you use these cameras, as you know, Doug, the more you use these cameras, the more familiar you get with them. So, well, maybe you don't know that because you don't use one.
Yeah.
You're always on to the next one.
my skill these days is actually learning how to use a camera quickly without having to open a manual. So that's
yeah.
But so many good cameras. Again, the big difference is if you want small, but you don't need it so small that it fits in a pocket, that's fine. The GM5 is a normal size purse. So if that's your preference, it works great.
Yep. Cool. Well, I think we nailed it. The last question on the GM5 is it would you, if someone has $1,000 burning their pocket, should they run out and get this one? Yes. I mean, this is a binary question. Yes, no.
I'll give you a trinary answer. It's yes if you're already in Micro Four Thirds.
Got it.
If you're already in Micro Four Thirds or you want to start in Micro Four Thirds, I think the GM5 is a great camera. If you're not committed to Micro Four Thirds and don't want to commit to Micro Four Thirds, then of course it's not the camera for you.
Yep. Perfect. That is completely fair. So what's coming up next on All About the Gear? What do you have in the Doug K Bat Cave over there?
Oh yeah, we got fun stuff. I don't have it in front of me, do I? Let's see here. No, I don't have it in front of me, but I've got the Sony A7 Mark II in my hands, or I had it in my hands a few hours ago. Yep.
Wait, you got it today? Did it come in?
I got it last week, actually.
Oh man, what do you think?
So far, so good. It's the image stabilization is great, and I have shot with it using my Leica and other M-mount primes. You just go into the menu, you say I'm using a 90mm lens, and you now have an image stabilized Leica lens.
Wow.
And I don't know of any other way that you can get image stabilization on those prime lenses like that, but it is glorious for that.
Now, Doug, you've shot with the Olympus OMD EM5 and the EM1, which also have that sort of legendary 5-axis image stabilization built in. Right. How did just a glimpse into your review? But is it as good, worse, better?
I would say the image stabilization is not as good. We've called it spooky good on the OMD EM1. Mm-hmm. I would say it's very comparable to what I see on the EM5. To me, the EM5 is not as good as the EM1.
which is, for me, I haven't tried the EM1 yet, but the EM5 for me is spooky good. So
I think I'm pretty sure they're different. I've never been able to have an EM5 and EM1 in my hands at the same time, so I haven't been able to do an A/B comparison. But the challenge for the Sony A7 Mark II is that sensor weighs more than 4 times as much as the Olympic sensor, because it's four times the area. And it's literally a matter of moving this mass around, trying to compensate for your handshake, hand movements.
In 5 axes, right?
In 5 axes, that's right. And now I think when you're using like a Leica lens, it might not be all 5 axes, but still, it's very good. I should correct myself. You could put a Leica lens on an Olympus camera and use the in-body stabilization. I think if you have an adapter, I think that works. I'm not sure. I haven't tried it.
Yeah, it does.
But it is not anywhere near the full frame, so you're not using the full frame of that lens's image. Right. But this is a full frame camera, shooting image stabilization. So that's the big thing. The A7 is only 14 months old at this point, and they've already replaced it now. Really nice camera. It's beefier. It's not like a little mirrorless camera. It is hefty. It's heavy. It's larger. It's rugged.
So it's not the same form factor as the original A7?
No. It is bigger, heavier, made out of different materials, and it feels much more like a pro camera. Sony is really doing some interesting stuff now with the A7 line.
Cool. It sounds like they're moving away from that we're smaller, lighter, into the let's just make it better and own the size and just make a better camera using today's mirrorless technology. That's
You're exactly right, and this is what we said in our annual wrap-up show. Mirrorless cameras, when they first came on the market, were all about smaller and lighter because that was the only real advantage they have. Now we're seeing the fact that not having a mirror is so beneficial technologically that we're getting cameras that are better. So we have better cameras because they're mirrorless. Oh, and they may be smaller and lighter, but not necessarily.
Yeah. Crazy. You tempted me to want to go try that camera. I may have to play with that one when you're done with it. Actually, did you buy that, or is that a Doug K?
That's from our friends at Borrow Lenses. Borrow Lenses gets many cameras very quickly after they're released.
Cool. Are you and not to keep diving into the review, but I know you own an A7 and an A7S, right?
I've sold the A7 in anticipation of this camera.
So you're going to get it. Okay.
I'm not going to buy this camera.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
You're not going to buy the A7.
And for the reason why, you're going to have to wait for that review.
Oh, okay. All right. You're going to wait for the A7S Mark II. That's what you're doing.
I'm not saying a word.
All right. What else do you have in your?
One more great camera that's coming right after that one is the Fujifilm X100T, replacing the X100S that so many people love, and I am really looking forward to that camera.
Me too. That is the camera. The X100 is the camera that introduced me to the world of mirrorless. And many people that listen to TWiP know that I was on this rant of trying to get that camera, and I couldn't because you couldn't get them anywhere. It's like nowhere. I couldn't even bribe anyone to get one. But now I'm still, I don't know. There's a part of me that still wants to play with that camera. So I may have to get it after you get it and play with it for a while.
It's the third generation of what was already a very popular camera. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah. Do you off the top of your head know what the big changes between the S and the T are?
No.
Okay. Just one letter.
I don't have it. Yeah, I don't have it yet.
Okay. Awesome. All right, Doug. Well, I think that's it for another episode of All About the Gear. This one, like we just talked about, was all about this guy, the Panasonic Lumix GM5, world's smallest interchangeable lens, micro 4/3 mirrorless camera, and more on the way on All About the Gear.
Thanks, Frederick.
All right, man. See you later.